Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week, it is the turn of the singer, composer, producer, and also novelist. It is the one and only Ian Donaldson, who was originally in various kind of punk bands in Scotland, one with Alan McGee, in fact, but then went on to form H2O and was, I believe, on the label of RCA and released various singles called Hollywood Dream, and also made the top 20 with I Dream to Sleep, and did an amazing album, and has since then gone on to work with various other people from Big Country, Simple Minds, etc., etc. But the exciting news is that his music career has reawakened, and he's got a new single out which has just come out titled All I Have Is Forever. Do check it out. This guy has got the best vocal ever. Such a voice and production as well. So All I Have Forever, do listen. You will enjoy it, I guarantee. Anyway, this is the interview with Ian, and after several minutes of casual chat, we got down to that very exciting subject that was the early formative years. Ian, it's over to you. Take it away.
When I was growing up, I was brought up in tenement land in Glasgow, so, you know, everybody had different tastes up the close that I lived in, so you could hear the Beatles, or you could hear even country music happening in my close, or you could hear Tamla Motown. So I heard all that growing up, and I was an avid Top of the Pops watcher, like we all were, because it was really the only programme to watch. But for me, it was David Bowie singing Starman. I mean, that was the moment. I remember sitting in the living room watching it 7:25, as you remember, on a Thursday night, and I was watching. And when David Bowie put his arm round Mick Ronson, and he said, I had to phone someone, so I picked on you. And had the bangles around it. I turned around to my mum and I said, that's what I want to be when I leave school, an alien. That's how much I knew. It was fab.
And she thought, great, that's all good too. That's not going to give us any sleepless nights. So there you go. So did you have a musical household at all? Were your parents at all?
No, not at all.
Yes.
Well, it was funny, my younger brother liked the Sweet, who did have amazing B-sides. So do you remember, did you buy any of the early Sweet singles?
No,
there was always
I'm just the greatest hits sort of fan.
Okay. Well, Shannon Chapman wrote all the A-sides, like Wig Wham Bam and all that kind of stuff, but they were allowed to record their own and write their own songs for the B-sides.
Right.
And some of the songs were like early heavy metal. Just sound brilliant. So maybe check them out. My older brother, he liked Roxy music, and I liked David Bowie. So it was always a kind of, as soon as my dad used to work nights, as soon as he left the door at 9 o'clock, we would all run through and try to grab the radiogram before either the other two did to play our records.
Yeah, that's quite. Your brother was very hip and groovy, wasn't he, with his Roxy music obsession? So, what was your first ever gig that you went to?
The Sweet, 1974, at the Apollo in Glasgow.
Right, blimey,
Yeah.
That's quite nice, isn't it? Really. And did you get dragged there by your older brother?
It was my younger brother. I had to go because he was 12, so he couldn't go himself. So my mum bought me a ticket as well, and I took him.
Oh,
it was a great night.
Your parents were so groovy. So were you kind of at that stage, were you kind of getting very excited with other bands? Because obviously Top of the Pops was our go-to thing. Basically, it was our only thing really, wasn't it? So people like, when you saw Alex Harvey on Top of the Pops, did things like that make you think, that's quite exciting as well?
I think that being, sons and daughters of glam did open your mind anyway, because, you had all these amazing songs with all these amazing artists on Top of the Pops who all looked different from each other. You had Mark Bolan, I always remember seeing Roxy Music doing Virginia Plain.
Yes.
And he looked like something from the Planet B. He had the green eyeshadow and everything. So already I think our DNA was beginning to change and be altered by all these otherworldly sounds and otherworldly people. So I think that a lot of people at that time became thinkers. People think that glam rock was somehow dumbed down nonsense kind of music, but I don't think it was at all. I think the stories I mean, what was a Virginia playing? What was a Pajama Rama? You know,
Yes.
all the young dudes, all that stuff. You know, I think that it set us up for punk, I think, as well. Because punk was another explosion, and we were all kind of about that age where it was like we had something to say, but didn't really know how to say it. It was all, I can see the pattern now.
So when did you discover your singing voice, which has kind of been so...
Well, I think I bought Ziggy Stardust, and I never had it off. When it was my turn to play it on the radiogram, I never had it off, and I just sang along. And the first school band was when I was 14. We were called Legend, and we had draped suits like teddy boys.
Nice.
And we played kind of souped up, rhythm and blues. I never stopped to think I could sing or I couldn't sing. I just knew I wanted to do it. So people were going to get it whether they wanted it or not, whether it was good or bad. So it was a bit like that.
And what was it like growing up in Glasgow at that time, that decade? Was it, yes, I have no idea.
Pretty grim. It was pretty much black and white. And I think when Top of the Pops was on, it was a little bit of Technicolor.
Yeah.
On a Thursday night. You know, that's really all it was, you know.
Because I was watching a documentary before Christmas. It was Scottish football managers, you know, and Bill Shankly was there. And he said you had two choices. You either worked down the pit or you played football. I mean, you know, Bill was good on his kind of sound bites, wasn't he? Did you have a sort of similar feeling that there wasn't that many opportunities kind of growing up at that stage? You know, you're thinking, blimey, we need plan C here because frankly, the first two plans are not good.
Well, you know what? I did play football. I played football for Hibs Boys Club, and I played the football for Harmony Row, which was the team that Alex Ferguson played for in Govan as well. I was up in the same area as him. But I liked art, so I ended up studying art. I left the football behind, became a punk, and then I studied art. And Edwin Collins and I were in the same year, in the same class.
Right.
And that's how we became friends. I remember him bringing in, there was a little record player called a Dan Set. It was like looked like a wee kind of handbag. And he brought that in one day. As you know, that seemed apt for Edwin. And he brought that in and he put on Denis by Blondie.
Yes.
And he just left it on repeat for 7 hours. Nobody thought to take it off. It was so good. It just continued. And that was when something else was happening, because although punk was great, there were people like Television, Blondie, Susie and the Banshees that were taking it further than three chords and an attitude. They were thinking, what else can I do with this? And I think that's what I'm talking about with glam. I think glam affected us, and it kind of primed us for being able to think and do something else. And I kind of followed that. I loved punk. I've still got the records. But I just knew there was more to life than that. But, you know, there's no master plan. I couldn't say, I sat down and the first two plans didn't work. I don't think, maybe nowadays, younger people maybe can think that way, but because there's much more at their fingertips, they can plan things. You can look at Google, you've got social media. But then I just, and that's when I met Alan McGee.
Yes, well, I was just thinking back on those days. The careers teacher was some sort of random person you saw for 5 minutes, and I must admit that was a cushy job, wasn't it, back in those days?
I don't think that would help.
But funny enough, that was my, you know, when you said about the Blondie single, Denis, that was my third ever single, because I bought, you know, Space Oddity, Rod Stewart Sailing, which was great, and then Denis, which had a B-side of something like Kung Fu Fight and then Contact in Red Square. And that actually, B-sides were good in those days. And that had a huge effect. And then I found out many years later it was originally done in the early 60s by something like Randy and the Rondells or something. But an interesting bebop number. So anyway.
Well, I think Denis or Sunday Girl, one of those was actually done by a band in the 60s as well, like the Magic Unicorns or something like that. You know, they weren't afraid to pick songs and kind of Blondie-ize them.
No, that's
absolutely. It's funny what you said about...
No, sorry, after you.
I was just going to say, it's funny you mentioned about the careers officer. I remember sitting outside the careers officer, his office, and it came my turn, and as I was walking in, he had his head down. He had one of those kind of Sweeney type haircuts with the sideboards and the corduroy jacket and the kind of tartan tie. And he shouted, "Name?" And I said, "Donaldson." And he said, before he even got to me, he said, "What do you want to be when you leave school, Donaldson?" I said, "A pop star." And he went, "Next." And that was it. That's all that happened.
Wow.
Absolutely true.
He had a hard day, didn't he, that chap? Blimey, yes. God, I would love to.
Tell me about you, David. Though. Tell
Pardon?
me about you. But tell me about you. Where were you brought up?
Well, I was brought up in the sort of rural East Anglian countryside, and it was one of those very sort of working class kind of worlds, really, with sort of, parents, sort of met and married when in the mid to late 50s. They were really young at that age. Mum was probably about 17 when she married, and Dad was about 24, and I was the third of three boys. There was a bit of a gap between the first two. Basically, they wanted a girl and they got me. But I had two older brothers. I was a bit obsessed with my oldest brother, who was really into football. He was a good football player, but he was also into prog rock. So I loved all his prog rock records. And yes, Genesis, Wishbone Ash, Barclay James Harvest. And yeah, so, you're just there in the countryside playing football with a few friends from the village and pottering around at school doing sort of CSEs, and then sort of not really knowing what you want to do next. But so it was kind of interesting because there weren't that many facilities and there weren't that many options, in life then. You just kind of, you didn't know any different though. I mean, it was incredibly working class. My dad used to have to work kind of in like one job, and then he got a sort of, I say, cash in hand job, I suppose you'd have called it, if you wanted to have a holiday, to save some money. Or my mum had to get a job just before Christmas if you wanted to get a few extra things, so she had to do one of those horrible kind of, I don't think she might have done turkey plucking or sprite picking or something like that, so it was one of those lives.
Sounds very familiar. Yeah.
So, pictures of us as young kids, we were all sort of grubby with either in wellies or football boots, just always kind of with mud all over ourselves, just getting into slight trouble. But luckily we grew up in a village that had a Second World War aerodrome on the side of it. And that was one of our playgrounds, which was incredibly dangerous.
Oh.
And but great fun, because there was so many things still to look, because it had been quite left since the Second World War. It all got really knocked down in the 80s. But when we were kids, growing, playing in that environment was just fantastic fun, So
Lovely. I like it.
Yeah, so that was me. Yes, and then the 80s, I was Mr. Indie Kid, really. So look. You met Edwin. When did you meet Alan Horn? This is the famous Alan Horn.
Yes, I did on a few occasions. Yeah, he was a bit of an enigma, a bit like Edwin. I think it was enigmas were us. I think that's really what Postcard was about. It was all kind of a little bit unusual. You had Joseph Kay and a few others, and they were all kind of slightly neurotic, socially challenged, just a little bit. It was a little bit. I wasn't sure sometimes whether it was contrived awkwardness or not. I wasn't really sure, but it was all a little bit. It wasn't rock and roll. I know that much, and it was interesting to watch because I wasn't part of that. I was more kind of, H2O really were on our own. We didn't really kind of. Our best friends were a band called Heavy Petting, which was a rock band from Glasgow. They went on to tour with. Thin Lizzy and all sorts of people in America,
yes.
Bon Jovi, and they were our friends basically. So it was possible to have little bits of culture that weren't related to each other. Postcard was one of those. You had the Senna Simple Minds one, and you had like Big Country and the bands from the Fife area. It was all a little bit different. We just kind of you saw each other in passing, but it didn't really cross pollinate in any way. It was going in different directions.
Yes, and I suppose you had the Skids who were huge, weren't they? But then, look, you mentioned the magic word, the magic name, Alan McGee. Tell us, when did you first meet Alan? He was really a box of fireworks. Really, he was. We used to keep fireworks under our beds and bring them out every night, playing with them in front of the open fire. Literally, it was like this big thing. We'd get some money, go to the little shop, get some fireworks, put them in the shoebox, and then get them out and go. Yeah, man.
Love it.
So, Jesus.
You know what? It is, it is kind of Darwinistic, isn't it? I mean, I'm surprised we've got this far because we survived all those
All
things.
our fingers, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. Well, no, Alan was working the railways at the time, and I just split up a band called Skroo. We were a punk band, a 4-piece punk band, and I put an advert in a music store saying, like-minded musicians for new, forward-looking band. Influences television, Roxy Music, all that kind of stuff. And Alan answered, and we got together. And he was a terrific bass player. He doesn't tell anybody that anymore. But
No,
so we
keeps
wrote
that so secret, doesn't he?
Yeah, he did. And we wrote a
Cheeky.
set of songs. We found a drummer, we found a guitarist, and we played our very first gig, a CND rally. It'll be 44 years. 44 years this 1st of May. I've got a gig in Glasgow just to kind of celebrate that. And that was the start of it. But it was always going to be short term because we didn't know what the future was or what it was, but we wanted to do something. So Andrew Innes, who's now with Primal Scream, he joined the band, and Neil Clark, who was in who's the boy that did Perfect Skin?
Lloyd Cole.
Lloyd Cole. So the 5 of us were together at one point, and it was just, it was a bit like under your bed. Somebody threw in a match, and it just kind of exploded, and everybody went their own way. I kept in contact with Alan now and again, but it wasn't really until about this time last year that I met him properly. And that's when he said, I've got an idea. I've been listening to your solo stuff and I really like it, but I've got an idea. And I said, okay, let's meet. So we met and had a cup of coffee. He doesn't drink, so we just had a cup of coffee. And he said, I've got a friend in Berlin. He's from Dublin originally. His name's Craig Walker, and he used to be in a band called Power of Dreams, which were a Dublin band, which were terrific. And he said, I think that you two should write together. So he introduced us. We go on like House on Fire, and then the single that's out at the moment is the first song that we finished. And that's it. It's gone full circle now from being Rockets, 17, 18 years old, and then all these years later, back together again. It's kind of a bit of a fairy tale, really.
So did you say Clive Walker you've collaborated with?
No, Craig Walker.
Craig Walker. Is he based in Berlin?
He is based in Berlin. You'll know him. He's written with everybody. He's written for film, scores, you name it, he's done it. But the band he was in, Power of Dreams, was a terrific band.
Yeah.
It's worth checking out.
I think I interviewed him recently. Christ. I must keep a note of all of these people. Yes, I suddenly thought, my God, that sounds familiar, actually. But, there you go. Yeah, but then you had other bands like the Pratts, didn't you, from Scotland, who were basically back 10.
There was loads of bands. I mean, just after us, then you had this kind of blue-eyed soul thing that happened with Hipsway and Love and Money and the Big Dish and all sorts of bands as well. I think Glasgow's very like Liverpool. It's a working class town with lots of singers. Really,
by the way, I am really envious because the great thing about the countryside is it's full of nature, but culturally, it's really barren, by the way. And so that's a downside. And even Norwich, doesn't have a huge kind of musical legacy. And, though you can try and flaunt the Farmers Boys, the Higgs and serious drinking, it doesn't really rock.
No.
It doesn't rock.
Doesn't really
whereas you just you reeled out all those names, and I just think, really, I'm so pleased for you. So there you go. Yeah, I know. It's kind of, I don't know what it is. We've got the venues, little venues, but we just never had that kind of, wow, look at that. Cherry Red Records put together a 5 CD box set of Norwich and Ipswich bands. They would struggle to get an EP. Well, I don't know.
Well, XTC, were they not from Norwich? No. XTC? No.
They're kind of, I think they're more in the Midlands somewhere, but being one of those people who's a bit hopeless and they're, embarrassed about geography, I have no idea, but they're definitely not from this area. So the Farmers Boys, who was signed at EMI on the same day as Kajagoogoo. So there you go. Don't go to a dinner party with that anecdote. That won't go down well. So look, the band explodes, and then you're in this incredibly groovy little band. And I have to say, the cover reminds me of, is it the Lotus Eaters? That sort of cover with the guitarist on the front of the because this is H2O, isn't it? Your next one.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is a slick machine, isn't it?
We didn't know it was a slick machine. We didn't know what a new romantic was. We didn't know anything. Again, you're just, even when we were making Dream to Sleep, the type of technology that was available at the time, it was really kind of primitive. So you were making up sounds as you were going along, and you were just trying different things out. Luckily, the engineer on that was Dave Bascom. Dave Bascom went on to produce Echo and the Bunnymen, Songs from the Big Chair, for Tears for Fears, all sorts of people. We got me, he was like the same age as us, and we got on really well, and he had loads of different ideas. You would come in the next morning and at the studio, and he'd been up all night, hammering something in the wall, or ticking something, and he put all these kind of sounds together, and it was really the start of not only thinking about songs being different, but also sounds being different. He kind of turned us on to trying different things as well, which is quite early days, but H2O was good. H2O was good fun. We got the gold medal. We got Top of the Pops as well. So for me, that was mission accomplished.
And sharp haircuts as well. So you actually toured with Kajagoogoo, didn't you?
We did. We did 30 dates with them, and
My God,
it was good fun.
I would imagine. I mean, let's face it, it was, because it was that kind of thing, 79, Thatcher gets in, we've got the Greenham Common, we've got, obviously you were very politically minded by your CND gig there, I'm sure. And and then you had the Falkland, the sort of Falkland crisis, and the miners' strike and everything else going on. So, let's face it, anything is better than just being on the dole, sort of one, sort of just claiming, I don't know, it was about £16 a week or something. It wasn't much. And actually, because a lot of the indie bands I've done, they did have sort of the job seekers allowance, enterprise allowance schemes, which gave them that 1 year of, I don't know, pretending to do something. But some, managed to sort of crack the music business in a way for a few years at least. So so the album came out on RCA. So how come you were suddenly, did you all relocate to London?
No, we spent a lot of time in London, but we still stayed in Glasgow about half the year. We come down when we had to record, because the recordings were done in London, and to do any press or TV work, most of it was there. Newcastle was a big player at the time as well, because you had Razzmatazz and a few other shows that were happening there, the Tube. But you really didn't have to be here be in London all the time. It wasn't necessary.
And what was your sort of memories of your sort of 30 dates and 30 days with Kajagoogoo? Was it kind of like almost like Beatle mania, or the Bay City Rollers? Did you think, my God, we've got screaming fans?
What the Rollers fans were, I think they were a bit more wild than the Kajagoogoo fans. I think they were more well behaved. But when we started the tour, the reason why the single charted, because I would plug it every night and just say to people, the audience, get your mum going buy the single on Saturday morning. And we saw it steadily going up the charts. And by the time we got to about, with a week to go, we were 17 in the charts. And it was down to that. And it was just people power, it really was. And it was, some people, are quite disparaging about Kajagoogoo. It's easy to criticise somebody else's success, and it's hard to get your own. That's the way I look at it. So they had #1 records. They were terrific players. So I'll defend them to the last.
Yes, but absolutely.
It really helped. It really helped.
And I know that I can't remember his surname, but Nick, the bass player, is quite the musician, isn't he?
Yes, Nick Beggs.
Yeah,
he's a terrific player.
I would imagine the band are good. Yes, my God, you must have sort of been. Yeah, so were you sort of tempted into that world of the Blitz kids and sort of the wonderful world that was Spandau Ballet, Duran Duran? Did you start feeling like this was your sort of a bit of a scene that you were sort of tapping into?
Again, you don't really know. It's only in hindsight that you can really see anything clearly. But we didn't really know there was a scene. The only thing I really know was apparently I was a new romantic then, and now I'm an old romantic. That's about as defined as it can be. We tapped in a little bit. We went to some of the parties, we had a bit of fun, but we were just our own people. We did things our own way. We made our own records the way we wanted to. We didn't really get too sucked into I just thought it was kind of pointless, to be honest, Dave. Now that I'm actually looking at it from all these years past, there was an awful lot of front in those days. You know how you looked.
Yes.
It's always been about the songs. I mean, that's what the thing that Alan McGee and I generally talk about is songs, great songs, and it's about trying to make great music. And even then, I knew that you would live or die, stand or fall, be remembered or not by what you made. And that's never really kind of left me. But it was fun, but I didn't really take it that seriously.
No, because most bands, and this is probably mostly indie bands, their story is like, they get together, they have 12 months, the honeymoon period, and they get the single. John Peel plays it, John Peel session, first album, things going well, traveling around the UK. I mean, your story is a little bit different, really, because you get onto that major and Top of the Pops, which is like, wow, that's kind of another kind of a bit of a different league, really. But then, the tricky second album or the tricky third album, but you don't get to the second album. What happens after the success of that first album? Because it feels like it's all lined up. Even the cover, looking at it 40 years later, it's a good cover. It's not like, oh, that's, well, you know what I mean, though. Sometimes you look at covers, in retrospect, you think, yeah, never mind.
That wasn't a good idea.
But the cover's good, it's a classic. There's nothing embarrassing about it, and there's no dodgy haircuts or moustaches, which is good. So yeah. So what happens after that album?
It's a difficult one to kind of explain in a few words, but basically what happened was the guy that signed us to RCA, Sean Greenfield, he had a kind of real vision for us, and the head of the company in Britain at RCA was in tune with that, and that's why we got money to spend on different things. But then he was offered the job, the managing director was offered the job in the United States, so he took that. And another guy came in, an RCA guy from Belgium, who just didn't like the band at all. So he stopped, allowing us to do things. He cut our budgets. He argued about everything we were doing, and the kind of soul left what we were trying to do. Our man Sean Greenfield was really frustrated as well, and we eventually said, "Look, there's no point in us being here. We want away." So they let us go. And at that time, we'd already recorded enough songs for a second album, but it just didn't happen. We went to another company called Legend Records, which was Woolworth's first attempt at having a record label.
Right.
So we put out another H2O song, a song called Blue Diamond. It got loads of radio play, didn't quite hit the top 40, and then they dropped us. And it was like, where do we go from here? It was one of those ones. It's just a kind of classic rock and roll story,
It is a rock and
roll
story. No
regrets.
And to be honest, you sort of had a good slot, sort of. Yeah. I know. Well, I'm doing this show. I mean, God, you realise. I mean, it's a bit like trying to go to the moon. Really, being in the band. Sometimes the stars line up and everything's just there. Sometimes you just think, oh, that was so unlucky. And some bands, I don't know, they get signed up and then, the next day they get a phone call and say, oh, by the way, the person who signed you has just dropped dead. So I'm afraid you're on your own again. The story of Twisted Sister is quite amazing. They had 10 years before they got a record deal. And bizarrely, it was when they performed on the Tube, so that somebody, eventually said, oh, okay, we'll sign you. But it was quite a story. I won't go into it, but it's a brilliant story. But did you play on the Tube at all?
No, we didn't. I was a guest on the Tube, and I was supposed to be backing vocalist for Frankie Goes to Hollywood. But eventually, at the last minute, they decided, no, we want girl singers instead. So it was going to be me, Paul Young, and Billy Mackenzie from the Associates. But I think Candy Statton or something, I can't remember who it was, but Holly wanted girl singers instead. So that was that.
Oh, that is so unlucky. That would have been just quite a moment, wasn't it? I'm sure she was well dressed for the occasion.
Well,
yes, good on. They were good times. Anyway, then, so look, you're in that wonderful position, 87, and sort of the band has folded. What happens next with you?
I became a hermit for 2 or 3 years. I'd been in bands since I was about 12 or 13, and I was just kind of burnt out. I just, I'd lost a lot of money personally. Our publishing company hadn't paid us for about 3 years, and they went bust, and our back catalogue went to EMI.
Right.
There was no money. So I just went home to Glasgow, and I was a hermit for 2 or 3 years.
Yes, it does
And
happen. The hermit period is quite horrendous, isn't it? God, it's terrible. I mean, it is, yeah. How do you cope trying to pull yourself out of that?
It was necessary. Again, you don't really know these things at the time, but it was necessary. And I'd never drank before, and I drank for about 6 months non-stop. And then I did stop completely and thought, what am I doing? So then I approached an old friend, and we opened a recording studio in Glasgow, and we started writing for other artists and producing other bands. Did that for about 15 years. Just really enjoyed it. Did all kind of thing, all types of music, country music, indie, heavy rock, whatever you want to call it. We did all that stuff, and then a friend introduced me to Derek Forbes from Simple Minds, and we got on really well. We thought we could maybe put a band together. So we got Mick from Simple Minds, and we got Bruce from Big Country, and then we got a guy called Smiley who played drums with Robbie Williams, and we formed a band called FourGoodMen.
Excellent.
And then we started touring. We toured all over America, and we toured Europe. We made some records, and that lasted for about 4 or 5 years, and that was a great time. That was a brilliant time.
Was it kind of? I mean, this is a bit simplistic, but was it a bit like group therapy? Because you all got quite a CV behind you. Was it a case of, God, this could be good for all of us?
Again, it was hard to really kind of pinpoint why we were doing it, other than it was going to be good fun, because we did 2 or 3 we did 2 or 3 H2O songs, we did some big country songs, we did the Simple Minds greatest hits, if you like. So we're playing to 20, 30, 40,000 people a night, and it was just amazing times. It was great fun.
Yeah.
And that gave me a taste for making music again. So
yes,
that's one. Yeah.
And then you do. There's quite a few things. You start writing. You do a novel, don't you? And then you bring out a solo album as well, which is. I mean, this is plucky stuff, isn't it? Did you keep the recording studio going at this stage, or had that sort of?
When FourGoodMen took off, there was no time to do the studio anymore, so I left that behind. But all that time, I was writing songs, but I was also writing a novel. And from the dream that I had of the kind of idea for the novel to it being on a shelf in a bookstore was 20 years. That's how long it took to finish the thing. Because I thought to myself, okay, a song's 4 minutes, keep it snappy, nice intro, no fat, keep everything relevant, and make sure you get a great chorus. And I just thought, well, you can just apply that to a book, surely. It's 400 pages. But I just totally underestimated it. I get so frustrated about not being able to do what I wanted to do. I had no previous knowledge. So I would write it, and I would put it away for 6 months. I'd bring it back out again, try again. And gradually, little by little, then it started to make sense. And I'm a big Ray Bradbury fan from being a kid.
Yes.
And to cut a very long story short, one of the songs on the H2 album is called Leonard, and it's Leonard Mead is a central character for a short story by Ray Bradbury written in 1951 called The Pedestrian. And it's about a time in the future where nobody walks anymore at night, and he's a writer and he does walk. Everybody stays in their home, a bit like nowadays in Los Angeles, I suppose. Anyway, so I wrote a song about that, and on the H2 album, I was buying a couple of books online, and I happened to meet Ray Bradbury's editor, a guy called Don Albright, and he managed Ray Bradbury and edited all his stuff. Again, long story short, I sent him a copy of The Pedestrian, Leonard, and he took it to Ray Bradbury, and he let Ray Bradbury hear it. And Ray Bradbury wrote this letter back to me saying, I really love the song, and your story is now part of my story. And he sent me a copy of one of his early novels saying, thanks for Leonard, love Ray. And I started to send the manuscript to Don, and he kind of edited it. And again, very long story, but he kind of guided me a little bit more. And eventually I managed to pull the shape of the book into such a way that it actually made sense, because I really needed a hand. I was writing loads and loads, but wasn't sure what to keep, what not to keep, how to go. So I learned a lot from him. And that's the kind of story of the book. It's a bit like standing in the same stage as David Bowie did when he was singing, Starman. All of a sudden, I'm in contact with my literary hero, Ray Bradbury, and I've been lucky. This is why I've got no axe to grind with what happened or what didn't happen, because who cares? I've had a ball, and I'm still doing it.
We're still walking and talking. Well, we're sitting down, but yes. But he started the creative writing course at the UEA, and I do remember reading The History Man. God, I'm hoping I'm talking about the same person.
The Illustrated Man, yeah, fabulous story.
Yes, it was. I have fond memories of reading that, and what a legend he is in this area. Yeah, all over the world. But so then when this comes out, you bring out your first sort of solo album, don't you?
Yeah, I did a solo single after the last H2O record. It was a cover of The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine No More by the Walker Brothers, who I love, and the guy that produced the last H2O record, a guy called Pete Walsh, he went on to produce all of Scott Walker's later albums, all the kind of strange ones. And he took a copy of my version to Scott Walker. And Scott Walker wrote me back a note saying, I really dig your version of Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore. I love Scott. Again, another dream come true. So it's another one of those things where, it's all good. It's all good.
Good, because your voice, especially on the single and on your solo album, is amazing. It's so kind of clear and such a perfect, it's just perfect pop, really, isn't it? So you must have enjoyed putting the From Stars We Came together. This must have been. It feels like it had a lot of joy in the production and the creation of it.
Thank you. From start to finish, that was about 6 years of writing songs and recording a little bit when I could afford to, and eventually pulling it all together. And that came out about 3 or 4 years ago. And yeah, I'm really proud of it. I mean, I'm really pleased how it turned out. And I do a lot of those songs live with some H2O favourites as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And who was the band you brought together for that, or was it done?
It's the band that I'll use live, or I wouldn't say use, the guys that play with me live, and they're on the last 2 or 3 singles as well, and there's some of them are on this present single. So I like to. It's nice to be able to work with people that you get along with that are also talented. That's the trick. There's loads of talented people out there, but they're not my favourite human beings. Maybe I'm not theirs, but so it's trying to strike that balance, so that you're not really fed up with anybody or want to fall out with anybody in the back of a van when it's been a bad gig or something. So those people are hard to find, but I found them.
Yes.
Found them.
People who can read the room, and got listening skills.
Yes.
Just read the room. It's not that difficult, but it certainly is sometimes. But yeah, so then you get before the single that's just come out, All I Have Is Forever. Did you, when you did There Are Days, this came out a couple of years ago, was this kind of just a sort of a next single from the album?
No, this will be that was intended to be the first single of an album that'll come out next year.
Right.
And that's when I met Andy Lenihan, again another guy that's worth his weight in gold. He's a video maker, filmmaker, and we recorded the video for that in a mausoleum just outside Glasgow in a couple of hours, and he's made all the videos that I've for singles since then. And again, he's another guy easy to get along with a big talent.
Yeah, so that's amazing. Yeah. So then, did you say last year you got in? Well, Alan and you sort of had a bit of communication. This is when the idea came together to do the new single, the new album, which is going to be coming out. Well, the single's just come out, and the album's coming out later.
Yeah, the album about next year. I just finished work with a guy called Jeff Bernstein. He's a friend from Dunfermline. He was in bands that supported Big Country and the Skids when he was the same age as I was in H2O. He's a classical composer now, And he sent me a piece of music, and it's like oboes and strings and just all these amazing sounds. So I came up with a melody and a vocal and some ideas for a bit of an arrangement. That came out. Alan liked that, but it was the one after that he liked. There's a song called Mirror Ball, which was my kind of glam song.
Yes.
And he really liked that. And that was what kind of switched him on to thinking, yeah, there's something in this. I'm amazed you're still alive. I said, I'm amazed you're still alive as well, Alan. So that was a kind of starting point, you know.
He does a lot of walking, you know.
He does. He doesn't take taxis. He doesn't take the bus. When he came to Glasgow, he'd walked over half of Glasgow before he got to me. And he's really, really fit now. He looks kind of good in the tracksuit. Before of it, I wasn't sure about him beforehand, but now he looks like he's wearing like a badge.
Yeah. Well, I'm a bit, to be honest, I sort of go around in my kind of, I suppose, gym running gear quite a lot. So I kind of relate to that new look that us men sometimes have got, but with good abs. And I think that's the main thing. We don't look like we're just sort of got our party pants on and just been to the pub all day. We're just, we're keeping it real, and it's nice. You check out people's training shoes, not in a nerdy way. Actually, that is really nerdy. You go, ooh, Adidas. Yes, so there you go. So yeah, this is a magic moment, isn't it? Meeting, after 40 plus years, and the story and the kind of, the way that people's lives intertwine. And I suppose when you're still, on the planet, basically, and sort of walking and talking, there's something quite nice to think, God, we've done it, haven't we? We've done, there's still more to come, hopefully, but it is also quite a nice feeling of, we've turned out okay. This is good.
It was a magic moment, to be honest. We just kind of sat. He actually invited me down, first of all, to be on he's got a radio show on Boogaloo Radio.
Yes.
And so when I went down there, a friend of his was also making a documentary about him. So he took me aside and said, just basically say whatever you want to say. So I just kind of gave it my view, of what I thought Alan was in those days, and he found it humorous. And I thought, you've still got your sense of humour. I didn't know what you were going to be like after all this time, because, he was managing the biggest band in the world, and he's, there at Nebworth, and he's at the side of the stage, and the reason why it started was because he found them and all that kind of stuff. And it's easy for people to forget just. Motown was really important, but so is creation. Creation is just equally as important as Tamla Motown, I think, to rock bands. And it's easy to forget when you're sitting with him just what he's achieved.
Yes.
But it's a comfort about it. It's a bit like, when you're in the same company as people that have done a few things, you don't really have to talk about the few things. That it just allows you to kind of like sit and be comfortable with somebody. You don't have to name drop, or you don't have to do any of that kind of stuff. There's nothing to be won or gained by doing that. It's a kind of comfortable, like, yeah. So I think we're just looking at each other as survivors to begin with, as you said.
Yes.
And then the rest of it just kind of seemed to go naturally. And no, it's good fun. It really is good fun.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Making the records is good fun too.
Well, I've spoken to quite a lot of artists, and I think the one thing they like and the one thing that isn't quite there is often just they want to make the music, and now making music, it's difficult. You've got to have the idea, but, the equipment is there. But being part of a label is just a lot more fun than just doing it yourself and then putting it on Bandcamp and then just seeing it slightly disappear and drown in the deep end of a swimming pool, really. So it's quite nice to have something, just a deadline, someone to phone, someone to to email to see how it's coming along, someone just to sort of, so you can kind of feel like the admin side is getting taken care of, and there's somebody who's wanting it to be done, and you can focus on that rather than thinking, well, one day I'll just put it on my little Bandcamp and it will just get diluted like a homeopathic remedy. So it's good. But I also, it's kind of interesting about Alan because for me, it's a lot about the 80s, the way it kind of started in London with the living room with his kind of little indie gig and those kind of, all those bands that he signed during the 80s, I find is just such a fascinating story. And it's like that Malcolm Gladwell, is it 100,000 hours, 10,000 hours you do to create something. And it's almost like, the 80s was all about, you know, the label, the little indie nights, all these little bands who were brilliant but weren't ever going to sort of pay your pension. And then one day, you know, you get this moment in the sort of early to mid 90s, and I think that perseverance is quite extraordinary.
I think that's really what it's all about. Wanting is never enough. It is a great start, but it's not enough. You have to actually do more than that. And some people talk, I'm in a band and we're writing songs and we're doing things. And it's almost like that first wave of enthusiasm seems to be enough for them. And it never actually goes any further than that. And it's always been about songs. It's, songs, they're gods with a small g, I believe. I mean, no matter who it is that you love, it's always the songs. And I'm not trying to write songs as good as Deacon Blue or Wet, Wet, Wet or anything. I'm trying to write songs as good as David Bowie and Roxy Music. That's what I aim for. And if I fall short, that's okay, that's great. But you really have to kind of think, could I write something as good as on Aladdin Sane? Could I write something as good as on Parallel Lines? You've really got to kind of aim and at the same time not be self-conscious about it, because this song that's out now, All I Have Is Forever, the music was an instrumental that Craig sent me from Berlin, and I came up with a melody and a vocal and added some guitars and a little bit more keys. But it's not a conscious thing to write for a market, because I really wouldn't know how to write for a market. The only thing I can think of is, and I always admire this about David Bowie, he always wrote about wherever he was in his life. So, you know, he was no longer a Moon Age Daydream or 5 years. He was Black Tie. He was, what's most recently, like Thursday's Child, whatever it happens to be. And I've always thought that, you know, if I can just write about me just now, which sounds incredibly selfish, but I only write songs for me. And I'm just hoping that maybe somebody else will like that. And it's a risk, but I would really rather stay at home and read or watch a movie than go and do something I don't want to do, especially now. Yes. And the music we're making at the moment is really what I want to do. And Alan, although he's hands-on, he says, you know, what have you and Craig come up with? And we played it to him. He said, I love this, let's just go with it. It's like a Tony Wilson kind of idea. You know, it's like, you know, yeah, well, what is it you want to do? Well, I'll support you, because I really believe in that. And he's a one-man army behind us, you know, like he can open any door, he can do anything, you know, and it's just, you just have to give him the right song. And that's the criteria. It's the only criteria, is that give him a song that he can believe in. And that's how the future's going to be.
Yes. And you know, on that Bowie front, you know, I sort of, like I mentioned, he was with me, you know, all through, you know, my life. And obviously, you know, that Black Star and Lazarus album, you know, was quite something, you know, and obviously he was writing, I think, so much about what he was going through at that period, which was to do with, you know, his health, his scans, his blood tests, his operations, probably, you know, and sort of, you know, he couldn't write about going out and, you know, burning rubber down the motorway. You know, he was, you know, writing about a Black Star, and you know, it was amazing. You know, it was kind of, I think it was slightly reference to an Elvis Presley song about, you know, when your Black Star comes,
was.
You know, your calling is here. So I've read that into that. So I don't know if that's true, but you know, it was quite interesting.
He was a kleptomaniac. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But he always added something of himself to whatever he stole or borrowed. Yes. So you're right about Black Star, but you know, Elvis couldn't have written what you couldn't have added what David Bowie added. And I think you know, to be the first song on your album after you die, look up here, I'm in heaven. I mean, that's amazing. That's amazing.
That is amazing. Yeah, it's too sad to believe, really.
It's spooky.
So yeah, crikey. But does that mean that for now, you know, you've got the single out, which is amazing. Are you now working on the album, and is this mostly with Craig, by the way, or is it going to be with different writers?
It'll be either I've written some original things and recorded them up until now. That half the album will be with Craig and half the album will be with my own songs. But if at any point as it nears completion, it tips one way or the other, we'll just pick the best 10 songs So
Yes.
that's what it'll be. That's the criteria will be, what are the best 10 songs, and I'll go with that, absolutely.
Yeah, it's quite exciting now because I've realised that I'm sure it is Craig who had done all that solo stuff, and I think the band did an album quite recently, but they still were in different parts of the world,
Yes,
having to sort of bring their stuff together and giving it to some poor
that's him.
producer engineer to say, "Yeah, could you just make it sound like we're all in the same room?" And apparently he did. So that's just amazing. So yes, the world on one level has become quite intriguing in that sense of being able to share files and to record in your own space and keep it going. So yeah, amazing.
There is an upside to every downside. Sometimes it can be hard to see. And for a lot of people, it's only a downside at the moment with COVID and what it's done to people's families and their livelihoods and everything. But I'm always kind of at my best when I'm under pressure. I feel like when something is happening in life, some people reach for a bottle or reach for a syringe. I always reach for music, and that's been my lifeline for all of my life. Basically, that's been my go-to place all the time. So I can put on a Dave Bowie album in the morning feeling really unwell, and then by the time it's finished, I've got a new lease in life. It's the best medicine in the world, and I think that you are obviously a big David Bowie fan as well. And there is a song for every feeling, and there's a song for every occasion. There's a song for every moment in your life, and there'll never be anyone like him again. I don't think. Because rock and roll was fairly new when he started as well. Now it's hard to find something that hasn't been done, or maybe just give it a different taint or a different flavour. But it's hard to be completely original. And
Yes.
when you look back in 50 years of his music, he's basically covered just about everything.
Yeah, it was boggling, because I love the fact that during the 60s, most of that work was a bit odd. And, you're thinking, I can't believe he was recording and releasing it while there was all this other music from Jimi Hendrix and not Jethro Tull, well, perhaps Jethro Tull, but
Yeah.
Jefferson Airplane, the Doors, the Beatles, the Stones, the Kinks, and David came along with these weird little quirky little folky numbers. And then suddenly, the 70s, and he's got the Angie Bowie, the Tony DeFries, he's got Mick Ronson, and slowly, suddenly in one moment it almost starts to change. And like in the 70s he did one album a year, produced a few other people's like, Transformer, Lust for Life with Iggy Pop, relocated in several different locations, was on several different films, and as well as toured huge amount of gigs. And you're thinking, my God, how did you do it? And as well as having a divorce with his wife, having a child. So it does, it's quite amazing that, from that context and his 80s, 90s, and then right up to his passing, it was just, he was an extraordinary character, which kind of is, but is inspiring because at the same time, he kept true to what he was trying to do. Apart from the late 80s, I must admit, two of those albums aren't great, but I do think Tin Machine is fine.
He admits that too. I mean, he did say that he got a terrible fright when Let's Dance became such a big hit, and he said he did fall into the trap of trying to write for a market for the next two albums, and that's why Tin Machine happened. I could see that immediately. What he wanted to do was he wanted to kind of like think things through, but he had to do it within the context of something else. So I think he always intended for himself to be a little bit of a passenger and let the band come forward. Because I went to see them at the Barrowland in Glasgow, and he did kind of hang about the back of the stage and let the other musicians take front center stage.
Yes.
And I think that it was some sort of therapy for him. I think by the time Tin Machine had come to an end, I don't think he ever had any intentions of it really lasting any longer than that. And by that time, he'd cleared everything out, and decided, I'm not going to do that again. Very clever. But, portable skills, that's what you had always. You could put him among other musicians and he could find a way. And that's what makes him really unique. I love Brian Ferry, but Brian Ferry's not just quite the kind of sparkling talent that David Bowie was. A guy that's really underrated, and I think he should be up there with him, is Ian Hunter from What the Hoople.
Yes.
I think he's really underrated. I've been to see him a few times, and just again, but quite a quiet character. Whereas Bowie was quite gregarious and just out there. Exciting times. I'm getting really think about all the wonderful things I used to think, in the songs that, when I heard Loving the Alien for the first time, or you heard Cooks for the first time, and just, these are all magic moments. I mean, they're really, really important.
Yes,
Incredible.
but it's interesting, Loving the Alien, because when he did the reality tour with Heathens Reality, they redo Loving the Alien, and it's a version from that live recording, which he says, they're a bit more happy with what it sounds like than it did on the album, which was probably Tonight, which I can't quite remember. I think it was
Yes.
Tonight. And it does, it's like, oh yeah, that does sound. A lot of it is to do with the production, really. It's kind of, it's an 80s production, isn't it, for those two albums after Let's Dance, which slightly makes it quite hard work in a way.
I think he was a wee bit unkind to the recording of Love and the Alien. I thought it really worked. But then, I mean, the one question I would like to have asked David Bowie, I never met him, but it wouldn't be the obvious one. It would be, do you really have any idea how important you are to people who listen to your music? Because I think that he was so set on being a future thing that, every time he made an album, he was already thinking about the next thing. And I don't think he'd really, I know Ziggy frightened him, but, I don't think he ever really sat down, and I don't get the impression he sat down and thought, really, what have I done here? What's happened? I think he was always thinking about the next thing. And when you hear him talking about the songs, they're not quite commodities to him, but they're a little bit, there's something, they're not as precious to him as they are to us. And I always thought it was a little bit strange, but having read loads about him after his death, then maybe we got him wrong in a way. Maybe we got him wrong in a way. Maybe he wasn't quite what we thought he was, and he'd probably laugh at that if he heard us all talking like that. But I thought, to me, it was like he was an alchemist. And he'd probably laugh at that, but I think there is an alchemy about what happened with the people he worked with. And I don't know if he really recognised that for really what it was, as I said, because he's on to the next thing. Maybe when he realised he was passing on, maybe he thought a little bit more about it, but I'd like to ask him.
God, yes, that would have been amazing, wouldn't it? It would just be amazing. Actually, to be honest, because I'm obsessed with Bowie, I've been sort of trying to interview as many people who had ever known him or worked with him, and it is it has been really fascinating, actually, because it's like, because I just want to kind of like, what was he like? How did he, and it is quite extraordinary. It's kind of all those stories from, like Woody Woodmansey, and I mean, that in itself is an amazing story. That the night that that Holy Holy was playing in New York, it was like David Bowie's birthday, and Tony Visconti gets his phone and he rings and says, "Hi, David." They'd just made Black Star, so they wish him a happy birthday, and they all go, "Hey, well, happy birthday!" And there was this rumor that David was going to appear that night on Holy Holy, as they were doing some album from that period. And then Woody said the next day, his phone was like, "What's going on?" And he was like, "David's died." He was like, "But we were singing him happy birthday the night before." Yeah. It was like all these kind of weird connections. But then, George Underwood, I've done an interview with him, who was the boy who sort of hit him in the eye and paralyzed his eye. And then, people like Ava Cherry and Dana Gillespie and even Angie Bowie. And, I have sort of, and various guitarists like Earl Slick and Garson and Jerry Lennon as well. So it's been kind of one of those kind of projects. I think, oh my God, you knew David Bowie. I must go and have an interview with you. And it's been interesting because one of the people who I did recently was he was a Scottish guy who was in a band called 123 or Clouds, and they were a 60s band from Scotland, but they were the first ever prog rock band, and David just hung out with them all the time in this kind of like, I just want to hang out with you. And then they have a big falling out, and this character, I can't remember his name, gets his keyboard, smashes it, says, "Fuck it, I'm not doing music anymore," and never plays music again. And then 20, 30 years later, he gets on with the rest of his life. And David starts mentioning, saying, this guy's a genius, this band had a huge influence. And David really makes an effort to meet him and invite him back into his life again. And, he was a bit like, I don't know why, but, it was just kind of an interesting little story, and I just found that quite fascinating.
I think it's a beautiful thing. I really do. I think that you hear more and more stories about what he did for people personally, but you never really, it was never really made public. Like, I didn't know he'd been offered a knighthood, and he says, "I wouldn't know what to do with that. That's not what I do. What I do." And I thought
Yes.
that was an incredibly honest answer. Whereas everybody's like, "Yeah, please, I'll have it. I'll have it." And I just thought a whole lot of integrity. Not for me. I don't need that. Moving on to the next thing. Not many people would do that. I don't want to deify him here, but that's not what I'm intended to do. But what I mean is that it was more than the man. It was so much about him. It was about his integrity, about his skills, about his people skills, about his tenacity. I just don't really see that in many other people, to be honest. It is unique, and it's a testament for us to be still talking about him, and for you still to try and find out from other people who spoke to him, and what else can you glean from them? What else did you not know already? What was their take on him? I think that's, and the number of times he's been mentioned in science fiction movies.
Yes.
Are you a Blade Runner fan?
I have.
Do you remember Blade Runner?
Yes, I do. The trouble is, I've watched it back in that period, but I haven't seen it again, actually. So it's all a bit of a blur. It's up there with Betty Blue and Diva, really.
It really is. But the Roy, the Rutger Hauer character, who releases a dove at the end, and he's a Nexus 7, and basically he's coming back to find out why his life he was given a limited lifespan by the Tyrrell Corporation, and his birth certificate is the 8th of January, which is David Bowie's birthday.
Right,
okay. And the building that the little watchmaker, the robot maker, is the Bradbury building. And it's all those kind of wonderful things that all kind of like piece together.
yes.
So there's going to be a track on the album. It's called Rachel Tyrrell. And Rachel Tyrrell was the Nexus 7 that Tyrrell created. She was the beautiful looking Sean Young woman. Do you remember, with the kind of 40s dress and everything?
Yes.
She doesn't know it yet, but she's immortal. But she doesn't know that yet. She's the only one that he made. And Deckard, Harrison Ford's character, falls for her. So this song, rather than doing a boy meets girl, boy loses girl kind of idea, the love song for the album will be Rachel Tyrrell, and it's about Deckard and her, their story. And I just thought that was kind of like more like David Bowie might do nowadays. Like, just not have it as, I don't want any of the songs to be ordinary. So I'm working on an arrangement like that at the moment with the keyboards player. I'm working with a guy called Rohan, and that's shaping up to be quite a kind of space epic. So I'm getting excited again because I just love songs. But you've just reminded me. So, hey,
this is good. This is good. Yeah. Well, no, you've got to keep the flow of this, don't you? I mean, if there was anything you could have just said to a 16-year-old self starting out, is there anything, with all the decades and wisdom and experiences, is there anything that you would have just kind of would love to have just whispered to them to say, oh, by the way, yes, keep doing that, or, oh, think about doing some, just have this.
I would say to him, don't run down the stairs with your hands in your pockets.
Yes, wise words.
Because when you're 16, you're 18. I remember it was like that. People like 24 were old bastards. 30, what the fuck? Are you still alive at 30? You don't need any of that. You really have to make some mistakes of your own, and just follow your heart. If you're in a rock and roll band, or you're in a reggae band, or whatever kind of band you're in, just do it to the best of your ability. But break your heart if necessary to write the best songs you possibly can, and never assume that when you go into a recording studio, you can let the song go and somebody else will make your day for you. You need to keep a hold of the song and make sure it's molded in your own image. You have to do that, because a lot of young bands, they'll have a demo and it'll sound great, and then they'll get Rupert in to produce it, who doesn't understand what's going on, but it's being paid a lot of money. So he just changes it and adds odd components that no longer work, and everybody's unhappy. So you've got to be really, really careful about that, because I remember when we signed to RCA, one of the reasons why we signed to RCA was because Roxy Music had broken up. Brian Ferry was doing his own thing, and RCA thought there's a niche for a band that's not kind of unlike Roxy music-ish, and they thought that Dream to Sleep was a little bit along those lines, and we didn't realise that that's what they were looking for from us. So when we started to do other things, this I was telling you earlier on about the MC that came from abroad, from Europe. He just didn't like what we were doing, so they wanted us to be a certain thing, and we wanted to kind of like expand. So it's the thing about nowadays about the internet. You might not make any money from it, but you can get to express yourself exactly how you like every time if you really want. But the chances are you'll never make any money at it. So really, it depends. It's always about your intentions. Why are you in music in the first place? Is it to get the girls? Okay, you can do that. Is it to get the boys? You can do that. Is it just to kind of say you're in a band? Is it to rehearse every Sunday night with the lads and you take 6 cans of lager in and you all get howling mad with it while you're playing the drums? It can be anything you want. But if you're only in it for the money, then it's a bad career move. Because I still believe it is a calling. I know that sounds really, but to be a musician like Neil Young or David Bowie or Queen or any of those, it's a calling. It's not just a business. And you really have to decide why you want to make music in the first place. And a lot of people don't, because you just want to be famous, and they're disappointed. You're disappointed because maybe your starting point was the wrong one,
But it's interesting because obviously most of these, interviews I do are from bands from the 80s, though other decades as well. But actually everybody has, they've done that moment and then other things and da-da-da. But they've always, I would say virtually everybody still wants to make music decades later. It's still kind of the thing. They might have had to get a day job, they might have had to do this and that, and they've life has got had some interesting moments, but mostly they're like, I still really want to make another record. And it doesn't matter, it's not going to be on, I don't know, I have no idea anymore. But there used to be the NME Melody Maker sounds, didn't there? That's all gone. Who knows what it is now? But now it's all about just like, I just want to make a record, I just want to have that creative process. And it's great. I just think it's just, quite genuine. I can see why there were so many good bands in the 80s, because actually most of those musicians, singers, are still wanting to do it decades later. There's not many who just went, I just kind of did it because, it was just this little thing that wasn't that important. It was like, no, it was really important to us and we really did it. Yeah. And, there was a few things we kind of should have done, which we didn't, but we were 24, so that's life. It was like,
and we were all kind of sons of glam at that time as well, and through punk and Bowie and Roxy music, and there's all those wonderful songs there, like Drowning in Berlin, Is Vic there, a million other songs, all completely different from each other. There isn't the same kind of palette nowadays for musicians. A lot of the indie bands sound quite like each other. They've got the big chant and they've got a certain drum beat. And a lot of the kind of R&B singers, it's kind of the same kind of, sounds like the same few guys that are making those records, the similar sounds and everything. And it takes, St. Vincent or I really like DC Fontaine, but they all kind of are something else as well.
Yes.
But it's in the 80s it was completely different. You didn't know what you were going to get, and a lot of things charted, and I think that's why so many of those people wanted to do it again. It's because it really did mean they were in it for all the right reasons. They wanted to make great records, because there's an old song that says, "Rock and roll, I gave you the best years of my life." And it's absolutely true. I think there's 2 or 3 different chains of thought now. A lot of people that made records in the 80s didn't have pensions. There wasn't a career like that. So it's a bit like, well, I don't mind doing Butlins and doing the sets over and over again if I can make a living at that. And there are other people like the Tears for Fears album was really good. And you can see they really want to kind of push the envelope again and do something a little bit different. So it's not everybody that's in it because some people are in it because they have to, because there isn't really an option. It is a bit like, I need to put food on the table and this is a way of doing it. And there are people that have made a little bit of money and can they can experiment a little bit and make enough from streaming or maybe doing live gigs to maybe keep it going again. So people are doing it for different reasons at this age, I think. And some of people are just doing it for the last hurrah.
Yes,
That's good,
absolutely.
good enough as well.
I know. Look at Phil Collins. He's getting, I think he has to be wheeled on and sat there and has to do. He can't even play the drums, but he can't even walk. But I still think that's quite amazing. They sort of like, we've still got another world tour later on in the year, Phil. It's like, blimey, they're really pushing the man, isn't they? But I have to say, because you mentioned Parallel Lines and great songs, I still think 11:59 is one of the classics of our time.
Brilliant.
It's just one of, lyrically and musically, I always kind of have to put that on. You think, what a song. 11:59, I Want to Stay Alive. It's a good one, isn't it?
And the thing is, they still want to do it. I mean, she still wants to do it. And they're co-writing with other people to get the best songs they possibly can. I mean, Pollinator's a great album. That's as good as anything they did before, I think. In fact, they're playing in Glasgow, and it's Blondie supported by, or special guest is Johnny Marr. I mean, that's just a marriage made in heaven.
Oh, that's interesting.
But I've got a gig that night because their gig has been pushed about so much. It landed on one of my gigs, so I can no longer go. But so I'll be doing a gig somewhere else on my own. But I would really like to have seen them together because I saw Blondie the last time they were here. She was amazing.
And the amazing thing is, Clem is he's always guesting on everybody's album if they're in New York. He's like, oh yes, we've got Clem from Blondie, and I guess he must think, oh yes, I'm free on Tuesday afternoon. I'll come and do your drum bit. Not going to do
What's the chords? Yeah, here we go.
So
were you ever a musician, Dave?
No, I was never a musician. No, it's such a shame. Never mind.
Did you ever try anything? Did you not try guitar at school or keyboards or anything? No?
No, we were remarkably, it wasn't, no, we didn't have that it just wasn't that environment and that world, unfortunately. And I sort of look at, everyone else I was at school with, and it was like, no, none of us were in bands, were we? We played a lot of football and messed about a lot, but there wasn't that. I don't want to blame my childhood, but I don't know if it's a little bit about being in a village in a countryside with not much else on. That's not a good enough excuse. But there wasn't that, there wasn't that kind of element of the streets and a city or town that, just had different influences that can have quite an impact when you're younger. So, but it's fine. It's fine. I've always loved.
No, but you are really knowledgeable, and you've got a bit of an insider's view of what music is about, and a lot of people don't have that. So you have, obviously you are listening to what people are telling you, but you've got your own point of view in there as well. And this is a little bit clumsy how I'm trying to compliment you. I'm sorry, but you do have. But it's a different kind of conversation we're having than I have with other DJs who are just, they play records and they go to the gigs, and there's not a great of depth about what it means to be in a band or to have been in a band or why you're still in a band. But you seem to have kind of got a handle on that. So that's what made me ask you if you'd been in a band before, because it's more rounded, and there's no disrespect to anybody else.
No, absolutely. Because that's, because I did mention earlier, and it's not in a sort of unpleasant way, but because I just think, if anybody's done anything, it's wonderful. And the Kajagoogoo thing, there was nothing disparaging about it, because it's like, well, God, they've done it. I didn't even get that far, so it's good. And yes, it will. Or I did an interview with a member of the Farmers Boys who said, yes, we were signed on the same day. So they had a group picture of the Farmers Boys from East Anglia in the countryside, looking very like you could imagine people from the countryside next to Kajagoogoo who looked quite beautiful. He said it was a bit of a strange photo op, but yes, we smiled about it. And and I still have those moments, especially I know Spotify, where you listen to Too Shy, and then you listen to Do You Want to Be in My Gang by Gary Glitter, and you think, there you go. It's a great band.
Listen, they're great records. I know he severely blotted his copybook, and he deserves to be in jail. Let's not. But he made some great records, and so did the Glitter Band.
They did.
Fabulous records.
And they're nice guys. So yes, there you go.
Yeah,
they're still doing it. But look, thank you ever so much for this. And that, dear listener, is the end of the interview. I know after it, we just keep babbling more. Anyway, a massive thank you, as always, to Ian Donaldson for giving me the time for that interview. And yes, do check out H2O, I Dream to Sleep, classic 1984 music. And that was from the album Faith. Yes, indeed. And also new material coming out, All I Have Is Forever. Stunning vocals, stunning production. Do check it out. It will change your life. Anyway, if you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, do C86 Show. All these have been archived, lucky you, on Spotify, I know, Podbean, and also iTunes. Check it out. C86 Show, it's all there. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.